Today I'm going to do a quick video on how I like to cook brisket. It's just going to be an introductory video of the most frequently asked questions I get asked. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about meat selection or barbecue selection, but if people like this video, then maybe I'll do a bit more. A piece of brisket here that's been backpacked. First thing I need to do is get it out of its plastic coffin. I'm just going to slice down the middle like this. Because now I've got essentially a good surface that I can work on, just using the plastic to keep things off my worktop. I'm just going to grab some paper towel and pat some of the blood off. Then once we've done this, we're going to start trimming a little bit of the fat away. And what we're trying to do is just get a good even layer of fat meat, so you can see already it's a little bit thin here. It's quite a good level here. Down here it's very hard, so I might trim a little bit of that off. It's quite hard here. And then normally this is the point section, this is the flat. In between here there's quite a pocket of fat, and you might want to cut some of that out just so it doesn't have to all render away. So I'm just going to get a knife. Be safe, cut away from yourself, use a sharp knife. You're less likely to cut yourself with a sharp knife than a blunt knife. What I'm doing here is I'm trimming it until when I press, I can feel the fat move. It's a good way of knowing that it's not so thick that it's covering too much of the meat. You need to leave some fat cap on so that it'll render down into the meat and give you a beautiful moisture. Stop the meat drying out. We're going to be cooking it for quite a long time. So. Right, I finished trimming the meat. Didn't have to trim too much off. That's the amount of fat that I took off. Now it's time to apply the rub. So this is not what it says on the jar. It's just a container that I'm reusing because I find it a useful size. I like my own mix of pretty much equal proportions of pepper, salt and paprika. The paprika almost acts just as a filler in some regards. It's just a mild paprika, because if I just do straight salt and pepper, I find the way I put it on it's a bit too much. So I'm just going to sprinkle this all over the meat, and then we're going to rub it in. Give it a good coating. Edges. Flip it over it a little bit. Just rub some of that in. I'd love to have enough of this stuff to be able to just like bathe the whole thing, but maybe one day. Pretty good coating all over that. On the other side. It's looking pretty good. Alright, just going to let that sit for a bit and wait for the coals to be ready. Okay, the barbecue is up to temperature, which is 200 Fahrenheit to 225. So I'm going to throw the meat in. Going to position the meat a little bit away from the fire with the thick end closest to the coals, and flat at the far end. And I'm going to throw a little bit of cherry wood into the coals to help that smoke a bit better. People use lots of different woods. I can talk about that in another video, but cherry is my go-to. And now it's just time to wait. So, cheers, and I'll see you in a little while. One thing that's important to note is that you don't need huge clouds of smoke bellowing everywhere to get good flavour. In fact, if you want to get good flavour, you really need quite a light smoke. It makes a much cleaner finish of the flavour. If your fire is hot enough, even though the cooking chamber is cold, you can control the temperature of those separately, you'll just get a fairly white, almost in some cases invisible smoke, but it's still imparting plenty of good flavour. So yeah, don't feel the need to choke yourself to death on smoke. If you've got that much smoke, you're probably not doing something quite right. Okay, so we're about 5 hours into the cook now. I've been keeping the temperature around 225 Fahrenheit, somewhere between 200 and 250. I don't mind if it gets too cold. If I've gone away from the barbecue for a while, I come back and it's only 175. I'm going to have a panic attack. What I really don't want is for it to get too hot. So keep it nice and cool. We're cooking it low and slow. The meat is starting to form a bark. It's maybe nearly halfway to the journey towards a nice bark on there, and I'll talk a bit about that later on. And essentially what I've been doing to hold that temperature is just topping up the firebox just with a handful of coals from time to time and a little bit more cherry just to add a bit of flavour. Probably stop putting the cherry in now because the bark is going to resist too much more flavour from that getting into the wood. But just small handfuls of charcoal to keep the fire going at a sensible temperature. Okay, so you can see on here the meat is getting quite a crust on it, or a bark as we call it in barbecue language. It's really close. I can't really describe how it is that I decide when it's ready, but it's getting pretty close now. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the bark on the meat now, so still got a few hours to cook. I'm going to wrap it in some greaseproof paper to stop it drying out while it finishes cooking. Just take the meat out of the barbecue, put it on this paper. You can use different sorts of paper. Some people wrap it in foil, some people don't wrap it at all, but I think it gets too dry. Into the meat, the bark is quite dark. It's not completely dry, it's still a little bit moist, and you can see it's just really mingled nicely with the fat cap that was on top of the meat when we first put it in there. Yeah, that's kind of the look I'm going for. You can feel it's reasonably firm to the touch. Alright, once I'm happy with how all that's wrapped and it's looking reasonably tight, I'll just carefully lift it back up and put it back in the barbecue to finish. Actually, I'm kidding about finishing it at the barbecue because now that it's wrapped in paper, it's not going to absorb any smoke flavours. I'm going to be up all night putting charcoal in the machine every couple of hours, stuff that. That's what ovens are for. So in reality, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the oven to finish. Okay, it's about 24 hours since the meat went into the barbecue yesterday. Moment of truth. I have let it cool down a little bit so that I can pick it up without burning myself. There's still a little bit of molten fat and stuff down here you can see at the bottom of the paper, so that's probably going to go everywhere. That'll be fun. Yeah, that's still pretty warm. Alright, let's unwrap this baby. You can see the juices everywhere. Still quite warm. Oh, look at that. I can barely even hold it before it falls apart. That is good. One thing I almost forgot to point out is just how tender this is. Look, it's like, it wobbles like jelly. Think about how firm this piece of meat was when I was rolling it around and putting the rub on it. Lots of connective tissue, lots of sinew. Now, that's just jelly. Oh, it's going to be so good.